you, Mark. Next, we have the influence of nonverbal and verbal communication on the construction of a young adult's spiritual life by Sara, Erdner.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the influence of nonverbal and verbal communication on the construction of the young adult's spiritual life. So first, I'm going to talk about the significance of this, to me personally, but also for you. And then I'll go into the literature I reviewed. I'm going to talk about the method I employed and the measures used for the research, and then the results, and then the whole meaning of all this hard work I put into this paper. So first, the significance for me was there were two factors involved. The first factor was nonverbal communication. When I was looking into the literature, I noticed that a lot of the literature talks about verbal communication in regard to the influence that it had on a young adult spiritual life in general. But for me, I thought, well, we all know that verbal communication only comprises communication at a max of 40%, so where's the other 60% at? Where's the nonverbal? Does that play a key at all in any of this? So I wanted to look at that, but also for me personally what was important was spirituality, and more specifically spirituality as a lens. Because every human, when they're born, is spiritual in some way, shape, or form, in the sense that you choose to either be atheist, agnostic, you choose to believe there's a God, there's no God, there's heaven, but there might not be a hell. And through this spirituality, you're looking at it as a lens to observe the rest of the world. And it's going to influence you in how you interact with society, how you communicate with others, how you basically operate in this world. So I wanted to see, okay, how does nonverbal communication, the first factor, have an influence on this spirituality as a lens? So I looked at the literature first, and I thought, well, before I dive into this massive pool, let me figure out what is spirituality defined when juxtaposed with religion. And I like what you said, Michael, in your thing about how you can be spiritual but also have religious tendencies kind of involved as well. But to help me kind of define spirituality, I'm going to talk about intergenerational communication and the 4 different generations that comprise our society today. So intergenerational communication is communication, me and my mom, or you with your parents, or generation to generation. And this, the oldest generation that we have in our society today is the silent generation, and those are born between 1924 and 1944. These are very routine-seeking people, very repetitive, wake up at the same time, go to bed at the same time. They had a set of beliefs and values instilled within them at a very young age. And they didn't waver from that until the day they died. It was expected of them to take on what their parents taught them. Now, this is a great definition of religiousness in the sense that religiosity is more of an institutionalized form of church. It's very, you go to church on these set days, you go at this time, you leave at this time. It's very routine, very repetitive. Now, following the silent generation are the baby boomers, and those were born between 1945 and 1964. The baby boomers were the people that kind of signified the beginning stages of the erosion of religiosity, in the sense that they came about and thought, you know, what about this idea of being more individualistic? What about taking on, maybe not necessarily completely, wholeheartedly adopting our parents' views, but still respecting them? There were still people with the baby boomers like, whoa, 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 everything we've been doing all this time has been working so far, let's not get outside the norm. So that was where spirituality kind of had a spark. After the baby boomers are the Generation Xers, and those are born between 1965 and 1981. These were the people that said, you know what, I really do value my parents' beliefs that they instilled within me, but I'm going to kind of mix things up a little bit and adopt it as my own and make it my own and not necessarily my parents. This was when spirituality kind of started to become more on the rise. It started to become more individualistic, more of this idea of personal transcendence. Now you have people like me who are the millennials that were born after 1981, and we're a Burger King, have it your way kind of people. We want to copy and paste what our parents had instilled within us and make it our own and be completely individualistic about it. So as far as intergenerational communication goes and spirituality goes, spirituality being a more individualistic view, and then intergenerational, there kind of seems to be more of a, from my generation and my parents, kind of separation, if you will. Now, from this, I wanted to look at the verbal communication from the literature, which is from the family communication pattern, which you guys talked about, which was the conversationalist versus the conformist orientation, which is the conversationalist being more unidirectional, encouraging your child's beliefs outside of what the family's traditional beliefs were. Juxtaposed to this is the conformist view, which is a very, conversationalist is more bidirectional. Conformist is more unidirectional, where the child is expected to conform to the parent's ways. The parent expects them to take on their role or views that they have at a young age. So I looked at that, I looked at the verbal, but then I kind of want to know, how does nonverbal play into all of this 60% that's left? Well, nonverbal communication, from what most researchers said, was very, very significant even for intergenerational communication, in the sense that 60% of the time, children are looking more at their parents' nonverbal cues than they are their peers, or intergenerational communication. And I thought that was very interesting, because they're giving most of the significance to verbal and nonverbal in intergenerational communication. Now, aside from this is intergenerational communication. This is within a cohort, me and my peers, you and your colleagues. And this, a lot of researchers said, was more of an extension of intergenerational communication as far as influence goes. Where, for example, my mother creates a torch for me, these values and beliefs, and when I turn 18 and I go to college, the peer is merely going to take that torch and run with the torch that my parents have already created for me, or your caretaker of your home. However, some research stated that there might be more of a mutual harmonious feel to this influence, but none of it really gave number one significance to intergenerational communication. And as far as nonverbals went, there's been a lot of research that hasn't really, it's been more questioning, saying, well, we might need to take into account the fact that once you turn 18, you're going to be in more a conducive environment as far as college goes, where you're around your peers more, you're around intergenerational communication more, so you have things like peer pressure, peer modeling that come into account. So all of this literature led me to this research question I had, and it was basically wanted to know, how does verbal and nonverbal communication in your family and nonverbal communication of your peers influence how you construct your spiritual life? Now, the method that I employed for this is I had a survey that I went about, and I put it on surveymonkey.com and sent it out to everybody. I had 127 participants, and these people were from a mid-sized southeastern University of Alabama in Huntsville that participated. And of these participants, I had 72% were female and 28% were male. Now, also with the age range, we had 19 to 55 years old, and the average age was 25 years old. And from this, we also asked what their religion was, and being from the South, we had 74% Protestant Christian, we had 12% Catholics, and then we had 14% other. And this other would be defined by agnostic, atheist, or maybe just some people that weren't comfortable with placing any of the other options on there. Now, as far as the measures went, I had 4 different measures that I'd asked in my survey. The first being the communication orientation. And this communication orientation was wanted to see if they were from the conformist family or if they were from a conversationalist family. Some of the questions that I'd asked in regard to this were, for example, my parents encouraged my ideas and beliefs. This would be for the conversationalist family. And now for the conformist family, I'd ask questions like, my parents sometimes become irritated with my views if they are different from theirs. So we wanted to see if that would have any significant relationship with the participants' spirituality itself. Then I'd asked some questions, just yes or no questions on the spirituality factors in regard to, we just kind of wanted to see, did they think prayer life constituted a spiritual life, or having a power or a relationship with a power greater than yourself constituted spiritual life? Just to see if the person's survey was of any relevance. If they went through and said no to all of them, then we were like, well, you don't really know what spirituality constitutes, or etc. The next thing that we looked at was spirituality involvement scale. This was the bulk of my survey. It asked 17 questions on a 5-point Likert type scale that looked at how involved you felt you were as the participant, how involved spiritually your parents were, and how involved spiritually your peers were. And this asks questions in regard to my life has purpose, my spiritual life fulfills me in ways that material possessions do not. And we asked that for the participant, and then we also asked it for the parents and peers, and just took the pronoun my out and put the parent and peer in. Then we wanted to look at the nonverbal immediacy scale to see, okay, how engaged are you in these types of behaviors with your parent or your peer? whether it be direct eye contact, open posture, sounds that indicate caring, smiling, things of that nature. But we also wanted to know, kind of extending from this nonverbal immediacy, was the nonverbal display of spiritual symbols. Are they wearing necklaces that have crosses on them? Are they wearing bracelets? When you go into their home, do they have statues of angels, etc., or whatever it would be for the religion that they would take part in? Now, going from this survey, now we get to analyze all the results, all the fun stuff. You get to come down and figure out what all this means when you put in the surveys. I did two things. I first ran a correlation test to kind of see, okay, what are the significant relationships between the measures that I had and the participants' spirituality. Then I did a linear regression to figure out, okay, of these that had a significant relationship, which one was the dominant influencer? Because the thing I wanted to know is a lot of the literature stated that it was intergenerational communication all the way, verbally, non-verbally, and I kind of felt like now in the 21st century, there's a paradigm shift. So in the correlation test, to see what was a significant relationship, we had the peers' spirituality had a very strong relationship. It was number one. And then there was peers' display of spiritual symbols. Then after that was the parents' spirituality, conversationalist orientation, and then the parents' display of spiritual symbols. So I thought that was interesting. We had the peers' spirituality and peers' display of spiritual symbols was one of the strongest relationships. So then when I ran the linear regression, as we had anticipated, it was the peers' spirituality that was one of the more dominant influencers of how a young adult constructs their spiritual life. And it was the peers' display of spiritual symbols that was the dominant influencer, with the peer spirituality being 51% of the variance, whereas parent spirituality was only 10% of the variance. So kind of seeing this whole paradigm shift between looking at the generations and then looking at us now being a more individualistic society, taking on that it's our peers, it's intergenerational communication that's more influential. Now, for me, what this means is the fact that I know now that it is my friends and it is my peer groups within my generation, within my cohort, that not only can they be an influence to me, but I'm also an influence to them, which is a huge responsibility to think of. And the fact that if we are all kind of in this world to make it a better place, knowing who we are influencing the most is something that is definitely beneficial to society. But also, when it comes to intergenerational communication, knowing, like, for my parents' sake, that instead of them being so worried about influencing me, maybe they need to be a little bit more worried about who I'm involved with and who is in my group of friends that I'm hanging out with, since they're going to be a great influencer in my life. Thank you very much.
And for our last paper, we have Transdisciplinary Studies of Spirituality and Religion in the Public University by Stephen.